There's a quiet frustration most people carry, but never say out loud. It's the feeling of doing everything right and still feeling stuck. You wake up early, you go to work, you pay your bills, you try to save, you try to be responsible, and yet something doesn't move. You're not broke, but you're not free. You're not struggling, but you're not building. You're in the middle. And here's the truth that most people avoid. The middle is not a destination, it's a system. And if you don't understand it, it will quietly keep you there for the rest of your life. In this audiobook, Escape the Middle Class Trap, you are going to uncover what most people never see. Not just how money works, but how behavior, identity, and decisions quietly lock people into a cycle they mistake for stability. You'll learn why income alone is not enough, why comfort can become your biggest limitation, why discipline, not motivation, is the real escape route, and how to rebuild your thinking so your life finally moves forward. We're going to break this journey into chapters, chapter by chapter, layer by layer. First, we expose the trap. Then, we dismantle it. Then, we rebuild you. Stronger, sharper, and impossible to ignore. This is not financial advice. This is awareness. Because once you see the system clearly, you can't unsee it. And here's the line I want you to remember from the very beginning. The middle class doesn't trap people with struggle. It traps them with comfort. Let that sink in. Because that single idea explains why so many people stay stuck without realizing it. If any part of your life feels like repetition, if you've ever wondered why progress feels slow, if you've ever felt like you're capable of more but can't quite break through, then this audiobook is for you. And before we begin, make this personal. Not for me, not for anyone else, for you. If something you hear resonates, don't just listen. Acknowledge it, because awareness is where change begins. Now, let's step into chapter 1. But first, understand this. Most people never escape. Not because they can't, but because they never realize they're inside something that was never designed for them to leave. And that's exactly where your journey begins. Chapter 1. The Invisible Cage. Nobody wakes up one day and says, I want to be stuck. Nobody dreams of living paycheck to paycheck. Nobody aims for just enough. And yet, millions of people end up there, not by accident, by design. The system doesn't feel like a cage. That's the trick. It feels safe. It feels predictable. It feels normal. You grow up hearing the same script, go to school, get good grades, find a stable job, work hard, buy a home, save a little, retire someday. Sounds reasonable, right? But here's the question nobody asks. What happens in between? Because between getting the job and retiring someday is your entire life. And for most people, that life becomes a loop. Wake up, work, pay bills, repeat. There's just enough comfort to keep you going, but not enough freedom to let you leave. And that's where the trap tightens. You get a raise, you feel progress, but your lifestyle adjusts, your expenses rise, your expectations grow, and suddenly you're earning more, but not moving forward. You upgrade your phone, you upgrade your car, maybe even your apartment, but you don't upgrade your leverage, and that's the difference. The middle class trap doesn't stop you from earning. It stops you from escaping, because it rewards behavior that keeps you inside it. You work harder, but your time is still traded for money. You earn more, but your expenses grow with it. You feel successful, but you're still dependent, and dependency is the real cage. Let me ask you something. If your income stopped today, how long could you survive? A month? 2 months? Maybe 3? That answer matters more than your salary because real freedom is not how much you earn. It's how long you can live without needing to earn. That's the shift. That's where awareness begins. Most people never measure that. They measure status. They measure comfort. They measure appearances. But they don't measure freedom. And so they stay busy without realizing they're not actually moving. This is where most people get defensive because the middle class isn't poverty. It's not struggle. It's better than that. And that's exactly why it's dangerous. Because when something feels good enough, you stop questioning it. You stop pushing. You settle. Not consciously, gradually. And that's how years pass. Then decades. Then one day you look back and realize you were always one step away from something more, but never quite reached it. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. The system doesn't need you to fail. It just needs you to stay. Stay working. Stay consuming. Stay comfortable. Because a comfortable person doesn't rebel. A comfortable person doesn't question. A comfortable person stays predictable. And predictability is control. This isn't about blame. It's about awareness. Because once you see this clearly, you start asking different questions. You stop asking, how can I earn more? And start asking, how can I build something that doesn't depend on me trading time? That question changes everything, but most people never ask it because they're too busy surviving inside a system that quietly rewards their staying. And here's the deeper layer. The trap isn't just financial, it's psychological. You begin to associate safety with routine. You begin to fear risk. You begin to value stability over growth. And slowly, you shrink your potential to fit your environment. That's the part nobody talks about, the invisible shift, where your mindset adapts to your situation, instead of your situation adapting to your potential. And once that happens, escaping becomes harder. Not because you can't, but because you no longer believe you should. And that's where the real work begins. Because escaping the middle-class trap is not about money first. It's about breaking that belief. And in Chapter 2, we're going to uncover the most dangerous lie that keeps people exactly where they are. The lie that sounds responsible, but quietly kills your future. Dear friends, we've just started working on this channel, so we'd really appreciate your support. Please like the video and leave a few words in the comments. It'll really help us promote it. We'd be very grateful. Let's keep going. Chapter 2, The Lie That Sounds Responsible. There is a sentence almost everyone has said at some point in their life. It sounds mature. It sounds careful. It sounds responsible. I just want to be safe. That sentence has stopped more progress than failure ever could, because safety, when misunderstood, becomes a cage disguised as wisdom. Let's slow this down. What does safe really mean? For most people, it means predictable income, stable job, low risk, no big moves. It means avoiding uncertainty. And on the surface, that makes sense. But here's the hidden cost nobody talks about. When you optimize your entire life for safety, you also optimize it against growth. Because growth requires friction. Growth requires discomfort. Growth requires stepping into situations where the outcome is not guaranteed. And if your identity is built around staying safe, you will unconsciously avoid the very opportunities that could change your life. That's the paradox. The same mindset that protects you also limits you. Now, let's go deeper. The middle-class system reinforces this idea constantly. You're told to get a secure job. You're told to avoid risk. You're told to follow the path that's already been proven, but ask yourself, proven for what? For survival or for freedom? Because those are not the same thing. Survival is maintaining your current life. Freedom is creating a life you don't have to escape from. And the strategies for each are completely different. Most people are trained for survival. Very few are trained for freedom. And that training starts early. You're rewarded for following instructions, punished for making mistakes, encouraged to stay within boundaries. Over time, you become efficient, but not expansive. You become reliable, but not adaptable. You become stable, but not powerful. And then you enter adulthood with a mindset that prioritizes avoiding loss over creating gain. That's when the trap becomes invisible, because now you're enforcing it yourself. You say no to opportunities before they even fully form. You hesitate when things feel uncertain. You wait for the right time, which rarely comes, and years pass. Let me ask you something honest. How many ideas have you had that you never acted on? Not because they were bad, but because they felt risky. How many times did you say, maybe later? How many times did you choose comfort over possibility? That's not failure, that's conditioning. And until you see it, you'll keep repeating it. Here's the truth most people need to hear. Risk is not the enemy. Uncalculated risk is. There's a difference. Jumping blindly is not the goal, but avoiding movement entirely, that's a guaranteed loss. Because while you're standing still, time is still moving. The world is still evolving. Technology is still advancing. Opportunities are still shifting. And if you stay in the same place, you're not maintaining your position. You're falling behind, slowly, quietly, but inevitably. This is why so many people feel stuck even when they're doing everything right. Because the rules they're following were never designed to create freedom. They were designed to create stability. And stability without growth becomes stagnation. Now, let's connect this to something deeper. Fear. Not loud fear, not panic, but subtle fear. The kind that whispers instead of shouts. What if it doesn't work? What if I lose money? What if I fail? These thoughts feel logical, but they're incomplete because they ignore the other side. What if it does work? What if this is the opportunity that changes everything? What if staying where you are is the bigger risk? That's the question most people never ask because they've been trained to fear action more than inaction. And that is one of the most dangerous mental patterns you can have. Because inaction feels safe in the moment, but expensive over time. Every year you delay compounds, not just financially, but mentally. You start trusting yourself less. You start doubting your instincts. You start shrinking your ambitions. Until eventually, you don't even consider bigger possibilities anymore. That's how the trap tightens. Not with force, but with quiet agreement. You agree to stay small. You agree to stay predictable. You agree to stay where it's comfortable. And in return, you get stability, but you lose expansion. Now here's the shift. Escaping the middle-class trap doesn't mean becoming reckless. It means redefining what safe actually is. Is it safe to depend on one income stream? Is it safe to have no control over your time? Is it safe to rely on a system you don't fully understand? Or is real safety built through ownership? through multiple streams, through skills that can't be taken away, through decisions that expand your options instead of limiting them. That's a different kind of safety. That's not fragile. That's resilient. And resilience is what creates freedom. There's a line you need to remember. Playing it safe will keep you comfortable, but it will never make you free. Let that settle, because once you truly understand that, you stop chasing safety as an endpoint and start using it as a foundation to build something bigger. Now, before we move into Chapter 3, pause for a moment. Reflect. Where in your life have you been choosing safety at the cost of growth? Be honest, because that answer is pointing directly at your next level. And in the next chapter, we're going to break down the financial behaviors that quietly keep people stuck, even when they're earning more than ever before. The habits that look normal, but guarantee stagnation. Chapter 3. The Income Illusion. There is a moment in most people's lives where they believe they've made it. It's subtle. It doesn't come with fireworks or celebration. It comes quietly, in the form of a paycheck, a slightly bigger number than before, a promotion, a new title, a raise that finally feels like progress. And for a moment, it feels like everything is working. You think, I'm moving forward now. But what if I told you that this exact moment is where many people unknowingly lock themselves deeper into the trap? Because income by itself is one of the most misunderstood indicators of progress. Let's break that illusion. Most people believe the path to financial freedom looks like this: earn more, save more, live better, eventually become free. Sounds logical, but reality doesn't follow that script, because something else happens alongside increased income. Your lifestyle expands, not dramatically at first, just a little. A better apartment, a nicer car, more subscriptions, more convenience, more "you deserve it" decisions. And none of these feel wrong. In fact, they feel earned. That's the danger, because now your expenses begin to rise, quietly matching your income. And before you realize it, you're earning more than ever before, but still dependent, still working for every dollar, still needing the next paycheck, still unable to stop. That's the income illusion. More money without more freedom. Let me say that again. If your income grows, but your dependence stays the same, you didn't level up. You just upgraded your cage. That line alone can change how you see everything, because the goal was never just to earn more. The goal was to need less while building more. But most people reverse it. They need more as they earn more, and that keeps them locked in place. Now, let's go deeper. Why does this happen? Because the system rewards consumption more than creation. Everywhere you look, you're encouraged to spend. New phone, new trends, new experiences, new ways to upgrade your life externally. But very few people are taught how to upgrade internally, how to think differently, how to allocate money strategically, how to build assets instead of liabilities. So even when income increases, behavior stays the same. And behavior is what determines your trajectory, not your salary. There are people earning six figures, living paycheck to paycheck, and there are people earning far less, who quietly build leverage, assets, and freedom over time. The difference is not opportunity, it's awareness, and more importantly, it's discipline. Because escaping the middle-class trap requires something uncomfortable: delayed gratification, the ability to earn more and not immediately spend more, the ability to say no when everything around you says yes, the ability to think long-term in a world addicted to instant reward. That's rare. And anything rare creates separation. Now, here's where it gets even more real. Most people don't track where their money goes. They assume, they estimate, but they don't know. And what you don't track, you can't control. Money leaks in small ways, subscriptions you forgot about, habits you normalize, spending patterns you never questioned. Individually, they seem insignificant, but together, they shape your entire financial reality. This is not about being cheap. It's about being intentional, because every dollar has a direction, and if you're not directing it, something else is. Now, let's introduce a concept that most people ignore. The difference between income and assets. Income is what you earn. Assets are what earn for you. Income requires your time. Assets can operate without it. That's the shift. That's the bridge. That's how you move from working for money to having money work for you. But here's the problem. Most people spend their entire income without ever converting it into assets. So they stay dependent year after year, raise after raise. They run faster, but stay in the same place. And eventually, they burn out. Not because they're lazy, but because the system they're operating in requires constant effort just to maintain. That's exhausting, and that's why so many people feel tired without knowing why. Because they're running a race with no finish line. Now let me ask you something powerful. If your income doubled tomorrow, would your life actually change? Or would your lifestyle just expand? Think about that carefully, because your answer reveals your current pattern, and patterns predict your future. If you don't change how you think about money, more money won't fix anything. It will just amplify what already exists. That's why mindset comes first, then behavior, then strategy, in that order. Now here's a shift you need to make. Stop asking, how can I earn more? Start asking, how can I convert what I earn into something that grows without me? That question moves you from survival into strategy. And strategy is where freedom begins. Because once you understand how to turn income into assets, you stop depending solely on effort. You start building leverage, and leverage is what creates exponential growth. Not linear, exponential. Meaning, your progress is no longer tied to hours worked. It starts multiplying. Slow at first, then faster, then unstoppable. But only if you start. Only if you break the pattern. Only if you stop treating income as the destination and start treating it as a tool. Because that's all it is, a tool, not the goal. And in Chapter 4, we're going to expose one of the most powerful forces keeping people stuck, a force that has nothing to do with money, but controls how you use it every single day. Your environment, and why the people around you might be shaping your financial future more than you realize. Chapter 4, the environment that decides your future. There's a force shaping your life right now, and most people never question it. It doesn't show up on your bank statement. It doesn't appear in your job title. It doesn't get discussed in school. But it quietly influences your decisions every single day. Your environment, not just where you live, but who you listen to, who you spend time with, what conversations you're part of, what ideas are considered normal around you. Because here's a truth that will challenge you. You don't just create your environment creates you. And if you're not aware of it, it will shape your limits without your permission. Let's break this down. If everyone around you values stability above all else, you will start valuing it too. If everyone around you avoids risk, you will begin to see risk as dangerous. If everyone around you spends everything they earn, that behavior becomes normal, not because it's right, but because it's familiar. And familiarity is powerful. It feels safe. It feels correct, even when it's limiting. This is how the middle class trap reinforces itself across generations, not through force, but through normalization. You inherit beliefs you never questioned. You adopt habits you never chose. You repeat patterns without realizing they're patterns. Let me ask you something honestly. When you talk about money with the people around you, what do those conversations sound like? Are they about building or surviving? Are they about opportunity or limitation? Are they about growth or fear? Because those conversations are shaping your thinking more than you realize. And thinking determines behavior. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable. Sometimes the people you care about the most are the ones reinforcing the very mindset you need to outgrow, not intentionally, but consistently. They'll say things like, just be grateful for what you have. Don't take unnecessary risks. That's not realistic. People like us don't do that. And again, it sounds responsible. It sounds protective. But it also sets boundaries around what you believe is possible. And if you accept those boundaries, you stay inside them. This is why growth often feels lonely. Because when you start thinking differently, you start seeing differently. And when you start seeing differently, you can't unsee it. You begin to notice patterns. You begin to question assumptions. You begin to feel out of alignment with the conversations around you, and that creates tension, not because you're better, but because you're changing. And change disrupts comfort. Now let's be clear. This is not about cutting people off. It's about upgrading your exposure, because if you want a different result, you need different inputs. You need to hear ideas that challenge you. You need to see examples that expand your perspective. You need to be around people who are building, not just maintaining. Because proximity matters. Not just physically, mentally, the books you read, the content you consume, the voices you listen to, all of it shapes your internal world. And your internal world shapes your external reality. That's why two people can have the same income but completely different outcomes. Because they're operating from different mental environments. One sees money as something to spend. The other sees it as something to multiply. One sees time as something to trade. The other sees it as something to leverage. Same resources, different thinking, different results. Now here's a powerful shift you can make. Start auditing your environment, not with judgment, with awareness. Ask yourself, who influences how I think about money? What beliefs have I accepted without questioning? What conversations am I repeatedly exposed to? And then ask the harder question. Are these inputs expanding me or limiting me? Because if your environment is reinforcing the same patterns, you will keep producing the same results, no matter how hard you work. Effort cannot outgrow environment. Let that sink in. You can be disciplined. You can be motivated. You can be consistent. But if your environment constantly pulls you back into old patterns, progress becomes slower, harder, and sometimes invisible. That's why intentional exposure is critical. You don't need to completely change your life overnight, but you do need to start introducing new perspectives. Listen to people who think bigger. Learn from those who have built what you want. Observe how they make decisions, because success leaves clues. And the more you expose yourself to those clues, the more your thinking begins to shift. Quietly, gradually, powerfully. And once your thinking shifts, your actions follow. And once your actions change, your results begin to transform. Now, here's the deeper layer. Environment doesn't just influence your beliefs. It influences your standards, what you tolerate, what you accept, what you aim for. If everyone around you is satisfied with good enough, you will feel pressure to stay there too. But if you surround yourself, even digitally, with people pushing beyond average, your standard rises, without force, without pressure, just through exposure. And that's how transformation really happens. Not through one big decision, but through consistent alignment with a higher standard. Now, before we move forward, pause for a moment. Look at your current environment, not just physically, mentally. What are you feeding your mind daily? Because that is building your future in ways you can't immediately see. And in Chapter 5, we're going to break down one of the most underestimated skills in escaping the middle-class trap. A skill that has nothing to do with luck and everything to do with control. Discipline. Not the kind that feels intense for a week, but the kind that quietly compounds over years. Because without discipline, even the best strategy collapses. And with it, everything changes. Dear viewer, we would really be grateful if you could share your ideas on how we can improve our videos in the comments. Thank you very much. Chapter 5. Discipline, the silent multiplier. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize motivation is not enough. Not because motivation is useless, but because it fades. It comes in waves. It shows up when things feel exciting. It disappears when things get hard. And the middle-class trap relies on that inconsistency. Because if you only act when you feel like it, you will never build anything that lasts. That's where discipline enters. Not loud, not emotional, not dramatic, just consistent. Quietly showing up, whether you feel like it or not. Let's be clear. Discipline is not about being perfect. It's about being reliable. Reliable with your time. Reliable with your decisions. Reliable with your standards. Because success is not built in bursts. It's built in repetition. And repetition requires discipline. Now here's the truth most people avoid. You already have discipline. You just apply it selectively. You show up to work even when you don't feel like it. You meet deadlines even when you're tired. You follow rules when there are consequences. So the question is not, do you have discipline? The question is, where are you choosing not to use it? Because the same person who is disciplined for their job often becomes inconsistent in their own life. They show up for others, but not for themselves. And that's where the gap forms. That's where potential gets lost. Now let's connect this to the trap. The middle-class system rewards consistency, but only in one direction. Show up, do your job, repeat. And for that, you get paid. But what about the areas that actually create freedom? Learning new skills, building assets, improving your thinking, managing your money intentionally. Those areas don't come with immediate rewards, so most people neglect them, not because they're lazy, but because there's no immediate pressure. And discipline without pressure is where most people struggle. That's the difference. Anyone can act when they have to. Very few people act when they choose to. And that choice is what separates those who stay stuck from those who break out. Let me ask you something honestly. What are you doing daily that moves your life forward? Not your job, your life. What are you building consistently? Because if your only consistent effort is tied to your paycheck, then your progress will always be limited. Now here's the deeper layer. Discipline is not just about action, it's about identity. It's about becoming someone who does what they say they will do, even when no one is watching, even when there's no reward, even when it's inconvenient. Because every time you follow through, you build trust with yourself. And every time you don't, you weaken it. That trust matters. Because if you don't trust yourself, you won't take bigger risks. You won't commit to long-term goals. You'll hesitate. You'll second guess. And hesitation keeps you exactly where you are. Now think about this. How many times have you told yourself you would start something and didn't? A habit, a goal, a plan. Each time, it felt small, but over time, it compounds. Not just in missed opportunities, but in reduced self-belief. Because your mind starts to recognize a pattern. You don't follow through, and that belief becomes your limit. That's why discipline is powerful, not because of what it does externally, but because of what it builds internally. Consistency creates confidence, not the other way around. Most people wait to feel confident before they act, but confidence is a result of repeated action, even imperfect action. Now let's make this practical. Discipline doesn't start with big moves. It starts with small, non-negotiable actions. Things you commit to, regardless of how you feel. It could be 1 hour of focused learning, tracking your expenses daily, working on a skill that increases your value, investing consistently, even in small amounts. Simple actions, but repeated daily, they create momentum, and momentum is what carries you when motivation fades. Now here's where most people fail. They try to do too much, too fast. They start strong, then burn out because they rely on intensity instead of consistency. But escaping the middle-class trap is not about intensity. It's about sustainability. It's about building habits you can maintain for years. Because real change is slow at first, then sudden. That's the nature of compounding. Effort stacks, results lag. Then suddenly, everything starts to move. But only if you stayed consistent long enough to reach that point. And most people don't. They quit too early. They stop when results aren't immediate. They go back to what's comfortable, and the cycle repeats. Now here's a line you need to remember. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. That's it. That's the entire game. Every day, you're making that choice. Short-term comfort or long-term freedom, immediate satisfaction or delayed reward. And those choices shape your entire future. Now, before we move forward, I want you to do something simple. Think of one area in your life where you've been inconsistent. Not because you didn't know what to do, but because you didn't follow through. That's your starting point, not 10 things. 1. Because discipline grows through focus, not overwhelm. And in Chapter 6, we're going to take this even further. We're going to break down how time, something everyone has equally, becomes one of the biggest dividing lines between those who stay stuck and those who escape. Because it's not about how much time you have. It's about how you use it. And most people are using it in ways that guarantee they stay exactly where they are. Chapter 6. The Time Illusion. There is one resource, that every single person listening to this right now has an equal supply. No exceptions, no advantages, no shortcuts. Time. 24 hours a day. That's it. No one gets more. No one gets less. And yet, some people use those same 24 hours to build freedom, while others use them to maintain survival. Same time, different outcomes. So the real question is not, how much time do you have? It's, what is your time actually building? Because time is not neutral. It is either compounding for you or against you. Let that sink in. Every hour you spend is either creating momentum or reinforcing stagnation. There is no pause. There is no in-between. And this is where the middle-class trap becomes even more subtle. Because most people are busy, very busy. Work, responsibilities, obligations, daily routines. From the outside, it looks like effort. It looks like discipline. It looks like progress. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Being busy is not the same as moving forward. You can be busy for years and still end up in the exact same place because activity does not equal advancement. Now let's break this down. Most people divide their time into two categories: work time and rest time. They work, then they recover. They earn, then they escape. And that cycle repeats. But there's a missing category, a critical one: investment time. Time spent building something that grows beyond your immediate effort, learning skills that increase your value, creating assets that generate income, developing systems that reduce dependence. This is the time that changes everything. But most people don't allocate for it, not intentionally. They tell themselves, I don't have time. But here's the reality. You don't find time. You assign it. And what you don't assign gets consumed by distractions, by habits, by default behaviors. Think about your average day. Be honest. How much time goes to things that don't move your life forward? Scrolling, watching, waiting, repeating? Hours. That feels small in the moment, but massive over time, because time compounds, just like money, just like habits, just like decisions. 1 hour a day doesn't feel like much until you realize that's 365 hours a year. That's weeks of focused progress, weeks that most people give away without noticing. And here's where it becomes powerful. You don't need to overhaul your entire life to escape the trap. You need to reclaim your time intentionally, consistently, because small, focused time investments create massive long-term results. Now let's go deeper. Why do people struggle with this? Because immediate comfort is easier than delayed reward. After a long day, your mind looks for relief. Something easy, something familiar, something that doesn't require effort, and that's natural. But if every day ends the same way, comfort becomes a habit. And that habit becomes your lifestyle. And that lifestyle becomes your limit. This is not about eliminating rest. Rest is necessary. But there's a difference between recovery and escape. Recovery prepares you for growth. Escape avoids it. And most people confuse the two. They escape daily and wonder why nothing changes. Now, here's a powerful shift. Start treating your time like an investment portfolio. Some time goes to income. Some time goes to rest. But a critical portion must go to growth. Non-negotiable. Even if it's just 1 hour, one focused hour, every single day, not distracted, not passive, intentional, because 1 hour done right is more powerful than 5 hours done mindlessly. That hour becomes your edge, your separation point, your escape route, and over time, It compounds into something undeniable. Skills, opportunities, leverage, freedom, but only if you protect it, because the world will try to take it from you. Notifications, distractions, requests, noise, everything competing for your attention, because attention is the new currency. And if you don't control where it goes, you lose control of your time. And if you lose control of your time, you lose control of your future. That's the chain. Now let me ask you something. If someone looked at how you spent your last 7 days, what would they say you're building? Not what you say you want, what your actions show. Because time doesn't lie. It reflects your priorities perfectly. And if you don't like what it reflects, you don't need more time. You need better allocation. Now here's the line I want you to remember. An hour is a mirror. It shows you exactly what you value. Look into that mirror honestly. Because change doesn't start with motivation. It starts with awareness. And once you see how you're using your time, you can begin to redirect it, not perfectly, but consistently. And consistency is what builds a different life. Now, as we move into Chapter 7, we're going to uncover something even deeper, something that silently dictates how you think about money, risk, and opportunity, your identity. Because until you change how you see yourself, you will always act in alignment with who you believe you are. And that belief can either keep you stuck or set you free. Chapter 7. Identity, the hidden ceiling. There is a version of you that you've been living as for years, not your potential, not your future. Your current identity. And here's the truth most people never confront. You don't rise above your identity. You act within it. No matter how big your goals are, no matter how strong your motivation feels, if your identity doesn't match your ambition, you will unconsciously pull yourself back. Every time. Let's slow this down. Identity is not what you say you are. It's what you consistently believe you are. It's the story running in the background of your mind. I'm not good with money. I'm just an employee. I play it safe. I'm not the type to take risks. I'm not ready yet. These aren't just thoughts. They are instructions. And your actions, follow them. That's why two people can hear the same advice and get completely different results. Because one sees it as possible, the other sees it as unrealistic. Same information, different identity, different outcome. Now here's where it connects to the middle-class trap. Most people don't identify as builders. They identify as earners. They see themselves as people who work for money, not people who create systems, assets, or leverage, and because of that, they never step into those roles. Not because they can't, because they don't believe that's who they are. That's the invisible ceiling. Now think about this. If you see yourself as someone who just works a job, how likely are you to start building something outside of it? If you see yourself as bad with money, how likely are you to manage it intentionally? If you see yourself as not ready, how long will you keep waiting? Identity drives behavior. Behavior drives results. And results reinforce identity. It's a loop. And unless you break it, you will keep repeating the same patterns. Now here's the shift. You don't wait to become someone new. You start acting like them before it feels natural. That's how identity evolves. Not through thinking alone, but through action. Small actions, repeated consistently. Because every time you act differently, you send a new signal to your mind. This is who I am now. And over time, That becomes your new baseline. Now let's make this real. If you want to escape the middle-class trap, you have to start seeing yourself differently. Not as someone who survives, but as someone who builds. Not as someone who trades time, but as someone who creates leverage. Not as someone who reacts, but as someone who decides. That shift changes everything. Because now, you don't just look for opportunities, you create them. You don't just follow systems, you understand them. You don't just earn, you allocate, invest, and multiply. But here's the part most people struggle with. It feels uncomfortable. It feels unnatural. It feels like you're pretending. Because your old identity is still strong. It's familiar. It's reinforced by your environment, your habits, your past. So when you start acting differently, there's resistance, doubt, hesitation. That's normal. That's part of the process, because growth always feels unfamiliar at first. But here's what you need to understand. Discomfort is not a signal to stop. It's a signal that you're changing, and change is exactly what you need. Now let's go deeper. Identity is shaped by evidence. What you've done, what you've experienced, what you've repeated. So if you want to build a new identity, you need new evidence. You need to prove to yourself, through action, that you are capable of more, not once, consistently. That's why small wins matter, not because of the outcome, but because of what they reinforce. Every time you follow through on a commitment, you build evidence. Every time you invest instead of spend, you build evidence. Every time you use your time intentionally, you build evidence. And that evidence starts to rewrite your identity, quietly, powerfully. Now here's a line you need to remember. You don't become successful and then change your identity. You change your identity and then become successful. That's the order, not the other way around. Now let me ask you something. Who do you currently believe you are when it comes to money, growth, and freedom? Be honest. Because that belief is shaping every decision you make. And if that belief is limited, your results will be too. So the real work is not just external, it's internal. It's rewriting the story. It's choosing a new standard. It's deciding, I am someone who builds. I am someone who learns. I am someone who creates opportunities, even before the results fully show, because they will, if you stay consistent. Now, as we move into Chapter 8, we're going to connect identity with action in a very specific way. We're going to talk about skills, not just any skills, but the ones that actually increase your value in a world that's changing faster than ever. Because in 2025 and beyond, the people who escape are not just the ones who work hard, they're the ones who adapt. And if you don't build the right skills, you don't just stay where you are, you fall behind. Chapter 8. Skills that break the ceiling. There was a time when working hard was enough, when showing up, following instructions, and staying consistent could carry you through an entire lifetime. That time is gone. Not slowly, not subtly, completely. We are living in a world where the rules are shifting in real time. Technology is evolving. AI is replacing repetitive tasks. Information is everywhere. Competition is global. And in this new environment, effort alone is not the differentiator anymore. Skill is. Let that land. Because if you don't understand this shift, you will keep playing a game that no longer exists. The middle-class trap today is not just about income or spending. It's about outdated value. People are working hard, but on things that are becoming less valuable over time. And that's the danger, because you can be disciplined, you can be consistent, you can be reliable, and still fall behind if your skills don't evolve. Now here's the truth. The market doesn't pay you for how hard you work. It pays you for the value you provide. And value is determined by skills, not titles, not effort, skills. So the real question becomes, what are you getting paid for right now? And how replaceable is that? Be honest. Because this is not about fear, it's about clarity. If your income depends on something that can be automated, outsourced, or easily replaced, then your position is not as stable as it feels. Remember what we said earlier. What looks safe is not always safe. Now, let's flip this. What creates leverage in today's world? What actually increases your value? There are skills that compound, skills that make everything else easier, skills that open doors instead of closing options. Let's talk about them. First, the ability to learn quickly. In a fast-changing world, the person who learns fastest wins, not the smartest, not the most experienced, the most adaptable, because knowledge becomes outdated, but the ability to learn, that stays. Second, communication, not just talking, clarity. The ability to express ideas in a way that moves people, because if you can communicate, you can influence. If you can influence, you can create opportunities, and opportunities are the gateway to growth. Third, digital leverage, understanding how to use technology to scale your effort, whether it's content, automation, systems, or platforms. This is where modern leverage lives. You are no longer limited to your physical presence. You can create once and reach thousands. That changes everything. Fourth, financial literacy. Not just earning money, understanding how it works, how to allocate it, how to invest it, how to multiply it. Because money without knowledge disappears, but money with strategy grows. And fifth, problem solving. The ability to look at challenges and create solutions. Because the market rewards solutions, not effort, not intention. Solutions. Now here's the deeper layer. Most people don't invest in these skills, not consistently. They wait, they delay. They tell themselves, I'll learn later. I don't have time. I'll figure it out eventually. But while they wait, the gap grows, and the gap becomes harder to close because the world doesn't slow down. It accelerates. And if you're not moving with it, you're falling behind. Now let's connect this to time. Remember, Chapter 6. You don't need 10 hours a day. You need one focused hour, 1 hour dedicated to building skills every single day. That's it. But done consistently, that hour becomes transformation. Because skills compound, just like money, just like habits, just like identity. And over time, they change your trajectory completely. Now, here's a powerful shift. Stop seeing learning as something you do occasionally. Start seeing it as part of your identity. You are someone who grows daily, intentionally, relentlessly, because in a world that is constantly evolving, standing still is not neutral, it's regression. Now, let me ask you something. If you stayed exactly the same for the next 3 years, same skills, same thinking, same habits, where would you be? Really think about that. Because that future is predictable. But now imagine you invested 1 hour a day into high-value skills. 3 years, over 1,000 hours. Do you think your life would look the same? Not even close. That's the power of focused growth. Now here's the line I want you to remember. Your income is limited by your current skills. but your future is not. That's where opportunity lives, not in what you already know, but in what you're willing to learn. And the sooner you start, the faster everything begins to shift. Now, as we move into Chapter 9, we're going to take these skills and connect them to something even more powerful: leverage. Because skills alone are not enough. You need to apply them in a way that multiplies your effort. Because working harder is not the answer. Working smarter is not enough either. You need to work in a way that expands beyond you, and that's where real freedom begins. We're so glad you decided to watch our video. We're also really curious to know which cities around the world are watching our videos. Could you let us know which city, or at least which country, you're from? We always read every comment under our videos carefully. Thank you. Chapter 9. Leverage, the force that multiplies everything. There is a moment when effort stops being enough, not because effort is useless, but because effort has limits. You can only work so many hours. You can only focus so long. You can only trade your time once. And that is the ceiling most people never break. They try to earn more by doing more hours, more tasks, more pressure. But no matter how hard they push, they are still tied to time. That's the invisible barrier, and the only way past it is leverage. Now pause for a second, because this word is often misunderstood. Leverage is not complicated. It simply means doing something once and benefiting from it multiple times. That's it. That's the shift. From linear effort to exponential results. Now let's break it down. If you work 1 hour and get paid for that hour, that's linear. One input, one output. But if you create something once and it continues to generate value, that's leverage. One input, multiple outputs. That's how you escape the trap, not by working harder, but by working in a way that expands beyond you. Now let's look at the types of leverage available today, because in 2025, leverage is more accessible than ever before. First, technology. You can build systems, automate processes, create tools that operate without your constant involvement. That's leverage. Second, content. You can share ideas, create value, reach thousands, even millions, without being physically present. One message, multiple impacts. That's leverage. Third, capital. Money invested wisely can generate more money without your time being directly involved. That's leverage. And fourth, people. Collaborating, delegating, building teams, multiplying output through shared effort. That's leverage. Now here's the reality. Most people never use leverage, not intentionally. They stay in the cycle of effort because it feels familiar. It feels controllable. But it's also limiting because effort alone does not scale. Now let me ask you something. If you stopped working tomorrow, would anything in your life continue to produce value, income, opportunities, growth, or would everything stop with you? Because that answer defines your current level of leverage. And for most people, the answer is uncomfortable. Everything depends on them, which means everything stops if they stop. That's not freedom. That's dependency. And that's exactly what the middle-class trap maintains. Now here's where it gets powerful. You don't need massive resources to start building leverage. You need intention. You need to start asking, how can I do this in a way that continues beyond me? Instead of just completing tasks, start creating systems. Instead of just consuming content, start producing value. Instead of just earning money, Start allocating it into assets, small shifts, but powerful ones. Because leverage builds gradually. At first, it feels slow, like nothing is happening. But then something changes. Momentum, you create one asset, then another. You build one system, then improve it. You learn one skill and apply it in multiple ways. And suddenly, your effort starts multiplying. Now, here's the key. Leverage requires patience because it delays reward. You work now for results later. And that goes against everything the middle-class mindset is used to. Immediate pay, immediate feedback, immediate reward. But leverage is a long game. You plant, you build, you refine, and over time, it grows. That's why most people don't stick with it, because they don't see immediate results. They go back to what's familiar, linear effort, and the cycle repeats. But those who stay consistent, those who keep building, they reach a point where everything changes, where their time is no longer directly tied to their income, where their systems begin to support them, where their effort compounds. That's the turning point. That's where escape becomes real. Now, here's a line you need to remember. If your effort doesn't multiply, your life stays manual. And manual work has limits, but leveraged work does not. Now think about your current life. Where are you relying purely on effort? Where are you not building anything that lasts? Where could you introduce leverage, even in small ways? Because that's where your next level is, not in doing more, but in building smarter. Now, as we move into Chapter 10, we're going to take leverage one step further, because building leverage requires something that most people misunderstand completely. Money itself, not how to earn it, but how to think about it. Because money is not just a resource, it's a tool. And if you don't understand how to use that tool correctly, you can earn a lot of it and still stay trapped. Chapter 10. Money, the tool most people misuse. There's a moment in life when you start earning money and you believe you've figured it out. You think, this is it. This is how I move forward. You earn, you spend, you save a little, and you repeat. But here's the truth that changes everything. Money is not the goal. Money is a tool. And if you don't understand how to use it, it will control you instead of serving you. Let's slow this down. Most people are taught how to earn money. Very few are taught how to manage it. Almost none are taught how to multiply it. So what happens? They stay in the same cycle. Earn to spend to repeat. Maybe save a little, but rarely invest with intention. And that keeps them dependent. Because earning money is not what creates freedom. Using money correctly is. Now let's break this into something simple. There are 3 ways people use money. They spend it, they save it, or they grow it. Most people focus on the first 2. Very few focus on the third, and that's where the gap forms. Because spending gives you comfort. Saving gives you security. But growing, that's what gives you freedom. Let that sink in. Because if all you ever do is spend and save, you will always need to earn. Always. No matter how much you make. Now here's the deeper layer. Spending is emotional. It feels good. It's immediate. It's visible. You buy something, you feel rewarded. Saving is logical. It feels responsible. It creates a buffer. But growing money requires discipline, requires patience, requires thinking long-term. And that's where most people struggle. Because there's no instant reward. No immediate gratification, just delayed results. But those delayed results are the ones that change your life. Now let's connect this to the middle class trap. You earn more, so you spend more. You save a little, but not enough to create real leverage. And because you're not growing your money, you stay dependent on your income. That's the loop, and it's reinforced everywhere. Advertising, social pressure, lifestyle expectations. Everything pushes you to consume. Very little pushes you to build. Now here's a shift you need to make. Start asking a different question. Not, can I afford this? But, is this helping me grow or just feel good right now? That question alone will change your decisions, because affordability is not the goal. Alignment is. Does this expense align with your long-term vision, or is it just temporary satisfaction? Now let's go deeper. Money follows attention. Where you focus determines how you use it. If your focus is on comfort, you will spend. If your focus is on security, you will save. If your focus is on growth, you will invest. And that choice defines your future. Now let's talk about something important. Fear. Because many people don't grow their money, not because they don't want to, but because they're afraid. Afraid of losing it. Afraid of making mistakes. Afraid of not understanding enough. And that fear keeps them in the safe zone. But remember what we said earlier. What feels safe is not always safe. Because not growing your money has a cost too. Inflation, missed opportunities, lost time, and time is the most expensive factor. Because money can be earned again, time cannot. Now here's the key. You don't need to be perfect to start. You need to be intentional. Learn the basics. Start small. Stay consistent. Because investing is not about timing the market. It's about timing the market. It's about consistency. And consistency builds momentum. Now here's a line you need to remember. Money that sits still loses power. Money that moves with intention builds it. That's the shift. From passive to active. From reactive to strategic. Now let me ask you something. If someone looked at your financial behavior, would they say you're building or just maintaining? Because your habits tell the truth, not your intentions. Now this doesn't mean you stop enjoying life. It means you stop living only for the moment. You create balance. You enjoy, but you also build. You spend, but you also invest. You live, but you also plan. Because freedom is not about restriction. It's about control. Now, as we move into Chapter 11, we're going to connect everything we've discussed so far, time, discipline, skills, leverage, and money, into one powerful concept, execution. Because knowing what to do is not enough. Understanding the system is not enough. You need to act consistently, strategically, without waiting for perfect conditions, because the biggest gap is not knowledge, it's execution, and most people stay stuck there. Chapter 11, Execution, where everything becomes real. There is a line that separates people who understand everything from people who actually change their lives. It's not intelligence, it's not access, it's not even opportunity, it's execution. Because here's the truth most people quietly live with. They know what to do. They've heard the advice. They've read the books. They've watched the videos. They understand the concepts. But they don't act. Not consistently, not intentionally, not long enough. And that's why nothing changes. Because knowledge without execution is just potential. And potential does not pay bills, does not build freedom, does not create results. Execution does. Now let's slow this down. Why do people struggle with execution? It's not because they're lazy. It's because they're waiting. waiting for clarity, waiting for confidence, waiting for the perfect moment. But here's the reality. Clarity comes from action. Confidence comes from repetition. And the perfect moment does not exist. So while you wait, nothing moves. And that waiting becomes a habit, a pattern, a lifestyle. Now connect this back to everything we've covered. You understand the trap. You understand time. You understand discipline. You understand leverage. You understand money. But none of that matters if you don't execute, because execution is the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. Now here's where it gets deeper. Execution is not about big moves. It's about consistent ones, small actions done daily, without negotiation, because big actions are rare. Daily actions, that's where life is built. Now let me ask you something honestly. What have you been delaying? Not because you don't know how, but because you haven't started. Be real with yourself, because that thing is your next step, not next month, not next year, now. Now here's the trap within the trap. Overthinking. You plan too much, you analyze too much, you wait until everything feels ready. But overthinking is just fear in disguise. It feels productive, but it keeps you still, and stillness keeps you stuck. Now let's flip this. What does real execution look like? It looks imperfect, messy, uncertain, but moving. You take the step, even when you don't feel fully ready. You learn as you go, you adjust, you improve. That's execution. Now here's a powerful shift. Stop focusing on outcomes. Start focusing on actions. Because outcomes are delayed, actions are immediate. You can control actions. You cannot fully control outcomes. So if you anchor yourself to results, you will get discouraged. But if you anchor yourself to actions, you will stay consistent. And consistency is what creates results. Now let's make this practical. Execution requires structure, not motivation. Structure, a system, something that removes decision-making and replaces it with routine. Because every time you rely on willpower, you create friction, and friction kills consistency. So you simplify. You define your daily actions, clear, specific, non-negotiable. 1 hour of skill building, tracking your money, working on something that creates leverage, not 10 things, a few key actions, done every day. That's execution. Now here's the deeper layer, identity. Remember, Chapter 7. You act in alignment with who you believe you are. So if you see yourself as someone who delays, you will delay. If you see yourself as someone who follows through, you will execute. That's why execution is not just behavior. It's identity in motion. Every action reinforces who you are. So every time you execute, you're not just making progress. You're becoming someone new. Now here's a line you need to remember. Execution is the proof of your intentions. Not what you say, not what you plan, what you do. Repeatedly, that's the truth. Now let me ask you something. If someone followed you for the next 30 days, watching only your actions, would they believe you're serious about changing your life? Or would they see hesitation, delay, inconsistency? Because your actions tell the real story. Now here's where everything connects. Execution plus time equals progress. Execution plus discipline equals consistency. Execution plus skills equals value. Execution plus leverage equals freedom. Without execution, none of it matters. Now take a breath, because this is the turning point, not conceptually, practically. This is where most people stop. They understand, they agree, and then they go back to their routine, Don't do that. Not this time. Make it different. Even if it's small, even if it's imperfect, start. Because starting breaks the pattern, and once the pattern is broken, momentum can begin. Now, in Chapter 12, we're going to confront something even deeper, something that silently sabotages execution. Even when you know exactly what to do, self-doubt, that quiet voice that questions everything. And if you don't learn how to control it, it will control you. If you like this audiobook, please give it a like. It will really help us promote the video. Chapter 12, Self-Doubt, the Quiet Saboteur. There is a voice that doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't make dramatic statements. It whispers, softly, consistently, convincingly, and if you don't recognize it, it will shape your entire life. That voice is self-doubt. Now here's the problem. Most people think self-doubt is a flaw, something to eliminate, something to fight. But that's not entirely true. Self-doubt is natural. It appears when you step into something unfamiliar. It shows up when you grow. It questions you when you expand. So the goal is not to remove it. The goal is to control how much authority it has. Because here's the truth. Self-doubt only becomes dangerous when you start believing it. Let's break this down. You have an idea, a goal, a move you want to make, a step forward, and then the voice appears. What if you fail? What if you're not ready? What if you're not good enough? And in that moment, you hesitate. You slow down. Sometimes you stop completely. Not because you can't do it, but because you trusted the doubt more than your potential. That's how it works. Quietly, repeatedly, over time. Now connect this to the middle-class trap. If you constantly doubt your ability to do more, you will stay where you are. If you question every decision, you will delay every move. If you wait until you feel ready, you will wait forever because readiness is a myth. No one feels fully ready. They act anyway, and that action builds readiness. Now here's where it gets deeper. Self-doubt often disguises itself as logic. It sounds reasonable. It feels protective. It convinces you that staying where you are is the smart choice. But what it's really doing is keeping you in your comfort zone. And your comfort zone is where growth stops. Let me ask you something. How many opportunities have you passed on because of doubt? Not because you lacked ability, but because you questioned yourself? Think about that. Because those moments add up, and over time, they shape your entire path. Now here's the shift. You don't eliminate doubt. You move with it. You act, even when it's there. Because courage is not the absence of doubt. It's the decision to act despite it. Now let's make this practical. The next time doubt appears, don't argue with it. Don't try to silence it. Instead, ask a different question. What if this works? What if this is exactly what I need? What if staying where I am is the bigger risk? Because doubt only shows you one side, fear, but growth exists on the other side. Now here's another layer. Self-doubt grows stronger in silence. When you don't act, it gains evidence. It tells you, see, you didn't do it. You can't do it. And that reinforces the pattern. But when you act, even imperfectly, you weaken it. You create new evidence. I did it. I tried. I moved forward. And that evidence starts to shift your belief. Now remember, Chapter 7, identity is built through evidence. So every time you act despite doubt, you are rewriting who you are, from someone who hesitates to someone who moves, From someone who questions to someone who executes. That's the transformation. Now here's a line you need to remember. Self-doubt doesn't disappear when you succeed. It fades when you act. That's the key. Action, not perfection, not certainty, action. Now let's go even deeper. There's another form of doubt that most people don't recognize. Comparison. You look at others, their success, their progress, their results, and you think, I'm behind. I'm not there yet. I can't compete. And that thought shrinks your confidence. But here's the truth. You're not supposed to be them. You're supposed to build your path at your pace, with your strengths. Comparison distracts you from execution, and distraction kills progress. So instead of looking outward, focus inward. What can you do today? What step can you take now? Because that's where your power is, not in comparison, in action. Now take a breath. Because this is important, self-doubt will show up again. It always does. But next time, you'll recognize it. You won't treat it as truth. You'll treat it as noise, and you'll move anyway. That's how you break the pattern. That's how you step forward. That's how you escape. Now, as we move into chapter 13, we're going to confront something even more subtle, something that doesn't feel like a problem, but quietly keeps people stuck for years. Comfort. Not the obvious kind. The hidden kind. The kind that feels normal, but slowly limits everything you're capable of becoming. Chapter 13, Comfort, the Beautiful Trap. Comfort doesn't look like a problem. It doesn't feel like resistance. It doesn't feel like failure. In fact, it feels good. That's why it's dangerous. Because comfort is not loud. It doesn't force you to stop. It doesn't tell you to quit. It simply invites you to stay. Stay where things are easy. Stay where things are familiar. Stay where things don't challenge you. And over time, that staying becomes your life. Now let's be honest. There's nothing wrong with comfort itself. Rest is necessary. Stability has value. Peace matters. But comfort becomes a trap. When it replaces growth, when it becomes your default instead of your reward. Because growth and comfort do not exist in the same space, not at the same time. You either expand or you settle. And the middle-class trap is built on comfortable settling. Let's break this down. You reach a point where things are okay. You're not struggling, you're not stressed, you're managing, and that feels like success. But here's the question. Is okay enough for you? Not compared to others. For you. Because okay has a cost. It slowly lowers your standards. It slowly reduces your urgency. It slowly numbs your ambition. Not all at once. Gradually. So gradually, you don't notice it. You stop pushing. You stop questioning. You stop imagining something bigger. And that's how years pass. Comfortably, but without real growth. Now here's where it gets deeper. Comfort creates routines, and routines create identity. You wake up, do the same things, think the same way, make the same decisions day after day. And eventually, that becomes who you are, not by intention, by repetition. And breaking that pattern feels uncomfortable because now you're stepping outside what's normal for you, and your mind resists. It tells you, why change? Things are fine. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. But that voice is not protecting you. It's limiting you. Now let me ask you something honestly. Where in your life have you become comfortable? At the cost of your potential? Think about it. Is it your job, your habits, your thinking, your environment? Because that area is where your next level is hiding. behind discomfort. Now here's the truth most people avoid. Growth feels uncomfortable every time. Learning something new feels awkward. Taking risks feels uncertain. Building something from nothing feels difficult. That's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're expanding. But if you avoid that feeling, you avoid growth. And if you avoid growth, you stay the same. Now connect this to everything we've discussed. Time, discipline, skills, leverage, execution. All of it requires one thing: stepping outside comfort. Consistently, not dramatically, but daily. Because small discomfort creates big transformation. Now, here's a powerful shift. Stop asking, is this comfortable? Start asking, is this moving me forward? Because forward movement is what matters. Not ease, not convenience. Progress. Now let's go deeper. Comfort also affects your decisions. When you're too comfortable, you avoid necessary risks. You delay important actions. You choose short-term ease over long-term gain. And those choices shape your future quietly, powerfully. Now here's the line you need to remember. Comfort builds a life you can tolerate. Discomfort builds a life you're proud of. That's the difference. Now this doesn't mean you live in constant stress. It means you intentionally challenge yourself. You create controlled discomfort. You push your limits in ways that expand you. Because if you don't create it, life eventually will. And when life forces discomfort, it's much harder, much more painful, much less controlled. So you choose it. You lean into it. You use it. Now, let me ask you something. What's one thing you've been avoiding because it feels uncomfortable? Not impossible, just uncomfortable. That's your next move. That's your edge. That's where growth begins. Now take a breath, because this is where awareness becomes action. You see the pattern, you feel the resistance, and now you have a choice. Stay comfortable or step forward, even if it feels uncertain, even if it feels difficult, because that step is what separates people who stay from people who escape. Now, in Chapter 14, we're going to uncover something even more subtle, something that looks like progress, but often leads people right back into the trap. Lifestyle inflation, the silent upgrade, that keeps people earning more, but never becoming free. Chapter 14, Lifestyle inflation, the silent upgrade, that keeps you stuck. There's a moment, right after progress, right after you earn a little more, right after things start to feel easier, where a quiet decision gets made, not consciously, automatically. You upgrade: a better phone, a better car, a better place, better everything. And again, none of it feels wrong. You worked for it. You earned it. You deserve it. That's the logic. That's the justification. That's the trap. Because lifestyle inflation doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like progress. But here's the truth. If your lifestyle grows as fast as your income, your freedom stays exactly the same. Let that sink in. Because this is where most people get stuck permanently. They increase their income, but they also increase their expenses at the same pace, sometimes faster. So even though they're earning more, they still need every dollar, still dependent, still tied to the system, still unable to step away. That's the silent loop. Now let's break it down. When your income increases, you have two choices. You can expand your lifestyle, or you can expand your freedom. Most people choose lifestyle because it's visible, immediate, rewarding. You feel the upgrade instantly. But freedom is invisible at first. It's delayed. It requires discipline, so it gets ignored. Now here's where it gets deeper. Lifestyle inflation doesn't just increase your spending. It increases your obligations. Your fixed costs go up. Your commitments grow. Your margin shrinks. And once that happens, you don't just want to keep earning, you need to, because your life now depends on it. That's how the trap tightens, not through struggle, through upgrades. Now let me ask you something. Have you ever earned more, but somehow felt like you still needed more? Now, let me ask you something deeper. What kind of life do you actually want? Not what you've been told to want, not what looks good to others. What do you want? Freedom of time, freedom of choice, freedom of direction, because that life is not built by accident. It's built intentionally. And now you have the blueprint, you have the awareness, you have the tools. The only thing left is execution. There will be days where it feels hard, days where you doubt yourself, days where you feel like nothing is changing. That's part of it. But now, progress is often invisible before it becomes undeniable. So you keep going, not perfectly, but consistently. Till wars, and over time, something shifts. Your thinking becomes sharper. Your discipline becomes stronger. Your habits become aligned. And one day, you look back and realize you're not in the same place anymore, not even close. That's the moment, the quiet realization that you escaped, not suddenly, not dramatically, but deliberately. Now let's take a breath, because this is your moment, not to feel motivated, but to decide. If this audiobook resonated with you, make it real. Don't just let it pass. Commit to something, even if it's small, because small actions create big changes. And if one line stayed with you, one idea, one realization, hold on to it, because clarity fades if you don't act on it. If you're ready to take this seriously, make it a contract with yourself. Not for me, not for anyone else, for you, because your future depends on what you do next. And if you want to stay accountable, stay connected to growth, keep learning, keep building, keep moving forward, because this is not a one-time shift. It's a lifestyle. And if you know someone who feels stuck, who feels like they're doing everything right, but not moving forward, share this with them, because awareness is the first step to change. Now, I'll leave you with this, a single line, one you can carry with you, one that defines everything you've just experienced. You were never stuck. You were just following a path that wasn't designed for freedom, and now you've chosen a different one.